You indicated that that this came out of stakeholders and meetings and whatnot, and I just wondered if you'd be a little more specific as to its origin and what the process was for the decision.
I don't have
this
that.
Proposal.
I was just reading from the MOU, so
Okay.
I don't have that particular. Not on the, but.
Yeah, Dr. Flores, part of the whole intent of this Roosevelt Partners development, with Fair State being a partner in that,
I'm familiar with
was to make available educational opportunities with Fair State. And that's really where the discussion's been going on about what that would look like for as long as we've been involved in Plaza Roosevelt, which is 4 years now, I think. So as we got closer to the completion of the building and Fair State better clarified what their role was going to be in this development, is when these discussions took on, I guess we got more specific as to what they wanted to do and the use of our facilities. So it's really no different. You know, we've had continued discussions with Cook Center for the Arts, which is part of that development also, in terms of expanding programming with them, and other partners in terms of how this whole thing works together from an educational perspective, as well as other perspectives for other partners that are there. So.
And I want to say it's a little bit similar to the partnership that we have with Kendall College, with the Public Museum School. That was kind of the same framework, same kind of concept, that we work with the community, and they were a part of that whole piece. Now, they obviously didn't need to rent space because they have their own campus right downtown, but it's the same type of structure. So we have done this kind of thing, not the leasing piece, but the partnership piece with other universities, with Kendall College, that piece of it, so with the Public Museum.
So
and I know that's a part of
Do we
Fairs,
have a
too,
dual
but
enrollment arrangement?
They don't have a dual enrollment, but there are other pieces, and I just want to go through
Okay.
some of the other components of this, because that's just one part. I talked about the after-school. They have middle school and after-school opportunities that they will expand their middle school and after-school programming, and this would be with a lot using their upper-level graduate and professional students that would support it. The area from a cultural, and they would do the cultural activities just as we sort of do with after school. And there would be an emphasis on early consideration of STEM careers. So that's sort of one of our themes. They would do there could be other college and career development evenings where they would be committed to extending opportunities beyond the traditional classroom. They would commit to assisting students and their parents in navigating college pathways. Literacy assessment, they would collaborate with them in their Center for Academic Literacies to identify literacy barriers for students, and to help work to remove them. They would also, just a traditional leasing piece, perhaps would offer some of their courses in the building. So from the leasing standpoint, it's straight up, they will be paying for all the costs and expenses around the actual lease. And as I said, it's for 2 years. They plan on continuing to provide these services in their own facility as they find something suitable in the community. And I would assume if they found something similar before the 2 years, that could, it wouldn't have to extend to the 2-year period, but the 2-year period is what they're asking for. And so this is in conjunction with this partnership. Did I capture it?
Yeah, if I try to make just some factual statements that don't see. The MOU, so there's two things. This is the lease agreement. The MOU went to the board a couple weeks ago after consultation. Superintendent Gorman worked with his staff to create the MOU of what Ferris would provide, and that would be ongoing regardless of where Ferris is leasing.
And that's what I just read to you all, the
And
terms.
so that's and that would be something that the board doesn't necessarily have, voting action over. The lease agreement, they do. this is the 2-year lease. And then in reference to the question about who's paying for what, all programs after school would be so the dual enrollment, the after-school dual enrollment opportunities, the middle school opportunities, which both of those programs are extensions of what Ferris is already providing to Grand Rapids Public Schools. Ferris was providing services at Burton Middle School for 2 or 3 years without paying rent. And then the adult education opportunities in the evening, all of those would be funded through local philanthropy or Ferris's funds. The dual enrollment during the daytime, Ferris requested GRPS to consider charging more for the lease arrangement, so that way they would offset the costs of the tuition that would be paid to Ferris. The superintendent was clear that there is funding available to provide dual enrollment credit up to 12 courses per student, and that this would just fit into that. Ferris is looking at ways to keep those costs to a minimum. Again, I think that Ms. Pitts did reference that a difference between, say, GRCC offering dual enrollment classes and Ferris is that Ferris isn't located, Ferris doesn't have property nearby, and so GRCC does.
Okay, so your statement about tuition is that there is an expectation for a cost outlay for the district to support tuition for our students to attend Ferris in a dual enrollment. And my question is, how much money are we talking in the future to provide this for Ferris's contract?
Well, there's no contract to provide dual enrollment. These would be courses that would be determined in collaboration with the principal and the district. And as far as the superintendent is concerned, they would deal with this dual enrollment payment in the same way they deal with all dual enrollment payments, and that would be no different. What I suggested is that Ferris offered Grand Rapids Public Schools an opportunity to consider a different kind of arrangement. Ferris would probably continue to look for ways to keep that arrangement low. Ferris is not looking at this as a way to make money. Ferris will lose money on this. The after-school dual enrollment opportunities, which should really give much more of an advantage to the school district, all of those would be funded by Ferris or by philanthropy, the same way that Promesa is currently funded by philanthropy. There's been no payment by GRPS to Ferris for any of its programs at Innovation Central, at Ferris, et cetera.
And just so that you all know, the lease agreement is leasing 2 classrooms. One that they'd use for office space and the other as a traditional classroom to be able to do some new services. And that's how we based, Mr. Oberst based his rent on the current market value or whatever. Square footage.
And then what implications does it have also for the services, providing services to students that we have projected would fill those spaces? I mean, we're giving up 2 classrooms. That's the other question.
We're not really giving up 2 classrooms because those classrooms there would be no one in those classrooms right now. And that's the only reason why we're even considering this. This is empty space at this point.
At this point,
and will
okay.
be for 2 years. So we would not be considering doing this if we had students in those spaces. This is just a way for us to continue. I mean, it's a good way from a business standpoint for us to recoup some costs that we'd be putting in the building. And the building we will only have 1 floor, is that right, of students?
First year.
Just the first year, and then the second year, the second floor. And that's why the space that they are leasing would not come into play until the 3rd year, and then they would be gone.
And we're not giving them an unfair advantage in a competitive nature to
No,
providing
they-
services to this district?
No, they're not getting any unfair advantage. We used it as a traditional business. This was a traditional business deal. And I know that's how Mr. Oberson, he could speak to that, looked at this.
Yeah, the lease and the process went through the lease, Dr. Flores and committee members, no different than other leases we have with outside entities. ELNC leases old Roosevelt building from us and space up at Sigsbee. And it's, we have a process we go through, and Fair State came to us, wanted to lease this, and as Ms. Pitts says, we have available space. Looked at the square footage, and I based the rental cost on the fair market value of discounted a bit, because it's not true commercial space, but what a commercial space would cost. So the $24,000 is what we came up with.
And they would be absorbing our extra custodial costs, so all
Yeah.
the wraparound costs that would be after, we leave anything in the evening, they would be absorbing at our regular price that we
Right.
charge for people, for custodial when we have events in the building.
And they have to provide their own security. It's their cost, so.
Any other questions?
So again, I'm recusing myself from placing a vote on this.
Yes, sir. Can I get a motion to move the Southwest Middle High School lease with Fair State University to the full board for consideration?
So moved.
Support? And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign?
Aye.
And that motion will pass and will be moved to the full board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item B on the action items is a purchasing agenda. Included in your materials, just a couple of things I'll point out, and certainly we can address any questions the committee may have. If you look at Section 1, General Fund, Item 2, the ELA Curriculum Ready Gen is on the purchasing agenda for the full amount, the almost $1.6 million. That is for both the consumables and support services, PD, a couple of, I'm going to call coaches. That is for a 6-year license. We are still negotiating with Pearson as to how that payment scheme will look. The full $1.6 million will not be paid this year, but we'll bring this for your approval. The whole process and the curriculum itself went and was approved came through our internal processes and then went to the Academic Achievement Committee a couple of weeks ago for the final sign-off. So that is a situation with that. Then we'll talk in just a minute about item under B, support materials, number 11, Eschbasher Consulting on an equity audit. That is next on the action item. We'll talk a little more detail about that. The other items in there is some, I guess, routine stuff, if you will. A couple construction-related ones. The service building parking lot had to be repaired and essentially resurfaced, happened back in August. We did that jointly with Dean Transportation because it included the area where the buses are. We, as the owner, only wanted to do a certain level of repair to that. Dean Transportation preferred we did a higher level, so they paid for the higher level. Our piece of it was $411,000. And then there was an asbestos removal project that went out for bid for almost $200,000 at Global Green Services. Ken provided a memo just behind the purchasing agenda and the two folks that responded to that. So those are the items that I wanted to point out to the committee, but I'm certainly, as I said, we will certainly address any questions you may have on that purchasing agenda.
May I ask one question? You
Sure.
talked about ELA.
Yes.
Is that a K-12 or is it just a K-8?
It's K through 5, 6 through 12 we actually purchased a year ago.
Oh, okay, okay.
So that's being.
So it's all taken up. Okay.
Yeah, this is being done this year.
And what is the name of it?
ReadyGen. It's a Pearson product. We actually have been piloting that ReadyGen in 6 or 7 of our elementary schools. I think we're in the 3rd year of the pilot. And so we obviously have experience with it, and the teachers at schools that were involved, the teachers were very instrumental in helping us as to what has worked, what hasn't worked with that. So that, but they like the product.
The Academic Achievement Committee, the most recent meeting, split its entire meeting focusing on that, and there's a lot of support materials. And the teachers were very excited about it. And one of the issues that the previous curriculum wasn't set up to fit into the current curriculum that the state of Michigan expects. This curriculum does.
So this is, like, the high school now is doing this
Yeah.
It's
ReadyGen.
actually called, it's a different product. It's same vendor, but it's called something else. I
can't remember. But
can't remember
anyway,
either,
this is what we really
Yeah.
need to move that achievement gap. Actually, Jonathan gave us all the details on this, but everybody was very excited about it. I think that for the things that we get pushed on a lot in terms of achievement gap, this would certainly address it. I mean, even to the extent, previous curriculums might reference bilingual materials, but this has bilingual materials at every level from the beginning. It fits the curriculum, and the materials are very culturally connected to the students, so it's not just kind of a one-off or something, and they have training and staff support. There's, I think, two of their staff people are embedded with our teachers for the year that will be assisting in the transition to it, and it's very impressive. I mean, it's something that is an advantage. Sorry, Kathy, you're
No, I just,
committee more, but it was really a great meeting and very exciting to hear about the
yeah,
opportunities.
I'm just wondering, so they are using this type of ELA in the high schools right now?
Yeah, because I am going off, I was not prepared to discuss the minutes of the academic achievement, but
The other thing is that the current K through 5 curriculum we use in Pearson also, it's a Pearson product, they stopped supporting it, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's so old.
Oh, it's so old, okay.
Good afternoon. I'm
Good
Jonathan
afternoon.
Harper. Yeah, so to answer your question, Ms. Downs-Lewis, so at the secondary level, 6 through 12, the product is called My Perspective, so it's the secondary focus. Originally, this was all brought to the table as a comprehensive plan, K through 12, when the My Perspectives plan was out. And then the decision, well, it would have been this current school year, there was the secondary adoption of this, and so this is the next step, is to do the elementary component as well. And as Dr. Baker mentioned and Mr. Oberst mentioned, the previous curriculum, we adopted that 10 years ago, I believe, a little more than that. And at the time, that was a good adoption, right? But that was prior to the state of Michigan moving into the Common Core state standards, and some of the challenges that we have with the current materials is they don't really support the teaching and learning that is at the heart of what's expected for student performance at Common Core. So we need to make the shift, and this is the right move.
So this is all
really,
online.
I think one of the most impressive things that happened, I think that anybody in education kind of has seen this shift from knowledge to skill. So, I mean, one of the key things that the previous curriculum did was try to teach students how to read technically, so that way they could do well on tests, right? But the way they did that was by having excerpts as the way students learn, but the students never got to finish a story. So therefore, they learned the skill, but they didn't actually learn the value of the story. And with that went the knowledge. So if we complain today about kids not knowing history, it's because we haven't been teaching it. They've only been reading excerpts of it. So this has shifted to a knowledge base. And so rather than an excerpt that might be, that's why it's so impressive with the bilingual materials, rather than the excerpt being an excerpt in Spanish. It's like there's a book in Spanish, and the child gets to read the whole book, and then the child sees that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a story that they find compelling, where they're asking for an opportunity to read rather than seeing it as a chore that gets them to a skill point. And, I mean, that was, and obviously the other thing, the teachers who have that obviously enjoy getting through the whole story more so than the skill of it.
So it's fiction and nonfiction?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a combination of, and we want to make sure there's relevance to content and culture. And, there's a broad range of text, so it's not just there's not blinders on looking at only one specific thing, but there's choice in the text, and we want to make sure that students can see themselves in the text, right? So.
And actually, even though I probably shouldn't assume this, but when I heard the superintendent candidate that we offered to hire last night, when she talked about her philosophy, it fit very much into the curriculum as the Academic Achievement Committee had heard talking about this curriculum. It fits very well. So, I mean, now that's my knowledge and not the technical knowledge, but I thought it fit.
You didn't read that whole thing, right? You didn't get the whole thing because you were just reading for technique and not for content, is that?
Listen, no, because there are people way more knowledgeable about this.
Oh, okay.
We were all impressed with the presentation.
I will trust you.
And the other thing that's nice is we appreciate, and Dr. Flores brought this up last year, is that these things come to academic achievement. So presumably when they get here, the Academic Achievement Committee has spent some time, vetting it.
Any other questions with regards to the purchases agenda?
One little question. On the Canada Middle School District dollars, how many students did that wind up being?
Which one?
I believe number 4.
I don't have that information for me, Dr.
I'm
Flores,
just
but I
curious.
can get it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can get it to you.
Thank you.
Rhonda, you don't know how many students we have at CI Center programs this year?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
What their enrollment figures are. Okay, thank you.
Our man Bill knows, but he's not here, so I can get you that information, though, easy enough.
And I would wonder if, with that equity audit contract being C versus B, and that's being a part of the purchasing agenda, should we touch on that first?
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can do that, that's fine. So the equity contract is, again, included in your material. Hopefully you had an opportunity to read that. We've been discussing this internally for a fair amount of time. The focus with this is a number of areas. Primarily is going to first focus on our whole enrollment process with our theme schools and others. And I think, John, you are here, okay. Maybe John, you'll give a little more meat to the.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President, members of the committee. Really excited about this opportunity. This actually kind of dates back. You might recall we had some challenges with our theme school process and the selections last year. And it happened that our friends at the XQ Super School Award were aware of kind of our dynamics and suggested that we participate in a conference out at MIT. And it was a conference all about equity and enrollment and accessibility to all the different school choices. And we were the smallest district of them. It was Boston, Denver, LA, Chicago, New York, and had a heavy emphasis on unified enrollment, which is something where many of the other districts, not unlike us, they have a portfolio of schools, not just neighborhood schools. They have theme schools or magnet schools. Many of them have charter schools that are authorized by the district as well. And so through that process, we were able to learn about this equity audit, where we're bringing in a consultant that's going to really focus in on a laser beam on our enrollment process, our theme school process from an equity lens. We've heard a lot of talk about tier 1, tier 2 system. This is the right work to really begin to unpack what is our process, what's working, what isn't, what are best practices on the national stage, how do we ensure that our application process as well as our guidelines for how we select students to attend the different schools how do we ensure that goes through an equity lens? And so a gentleman who's the former director of Denver Public Schools, who led them through a very comprehensive process that also looks at transportation, it looks at all things around there to ensure students have equitable access to all of the quality school choices, whether they're neighborhood, their theme, or there's something else. And so the work that Brian would do would start immediately. We'd be looking at what we can do to begin focus groups with various stakeholders, from students, parents, staff, principals, and continue to kind of go through that process. So this is the first step in what we think is some really high quality work through the equity lens. But it is very narrowly focused on our enrollment and our theme process. I know Sharon was out, and Christian, well, Kim, you were out at the conference. We were also at a conference out in Washington, D.C., where there's some really, it was focused on equity. And so some of this work is very much aligned with where I think the vision of the board is on even looking at it from a policy perspective.
I have a question with regards to the contract. Is that covering just phase one, or will that be through phase two as well?
My understanding is it covers phase one and phase two. The phase two deliverable are recommendations, and then when it comes to potential implementation, I believe if we needed his services further, that would be an additional contract.
Where did we hear about this before? Did you present this to us?
There was some, I think, conversation maybe around the theme school process, but I'm not sure. I know that we've talked about having gone out to MIT and participated in this conference. I know that was shared at one point, but that was almost a year ago.
Is this the only company that provides this kind of service?
I'm not aware of what, but I would assume there are other companies that provide these services.
Okay, and so how is it that we centered in on this particular company?
That was as part of the context that we met out at this conference, and we entered into a conversation, and that's how we got in touch with them.
Okay, and so this company has a track record of providing similar services that are described in this particular proposal to other districts?
That's correct.
Okay, and you've reviewed those?
We absolutely have.
And you believe that this is the best company out there providing these types of tailored services for equity?
Yeah, I feel very comfortable based on what we learned and the relationship that we built that he will do high-quality work for us on something that is of utmost importance.
And you have some comparables or some evidence of other districts that have undergone this same review by this same company?
Sure. What we learned, I mean, this is a lot of the information is what we gleaned out at the conference.
I'm going to say that, we really need to do this analysis. I continue to be concerned about our processes in selecting groups. It is something that I brought up at the policy committee. It is something that I brought up here before. I'm concerned about the perception of special contracts and special, consultants. And how we choose them. And I think that there ought to be some safeguards to ensure that there is a competitive equality administered by our district when consulting with groups. And I do, have history, and I know how things are developed and have developed in the past, and how, there are certain, consultants that we've chosen over others. But, and again, I think that this is important to our district as a first step. I would be opposed at this point to engage in a multi-year contract with any group that we have not properly, I'm not saying we didn't properly vet, but that we have not all, had an opportunity to properly vet.
When is this supposed to begin, though? It's supposed to begin pretty soon, isn't it?
I mean, if possible, it could start as early as mid to late March, pending board approval.
Well, I, for one, think it's work that needs to be done, and I guess I understand your position, Dr. Flores, and we've talked about this at policy, and I think you're right, we need to establish a policy, but since such a policy does not exist at this particular time, and we are going to have to rely on the people that we trust to do these kinds of things for us, and so I will support this contract.
Yeah, it's work that needs to get done. Was so evident. It was evident in those superintendent community meetings. It was evident in most conversations that I'm a part of. If there's a critique of GRPS, it's how we do this. And this group got vetted by you all because they do that work, and that work is evidently quality work. So I want to support it. And postponing the work means we postpone another year for how we do enrollment for the following year. So
Justice delayed.
Mr. Himmel, is there information that you can share with the full board if this moves forward, kind of about some of that track record and
Background analysis, absolutely.
that you can share with us if this moves to the full board at that meeting, so that we can feel some of the confidence that you feel in making that decision. I agree that from the issues that we've had around enrollment, that indeed we need to do something, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we don't have a misstep in trying to do something. So I think any confidence that you can give to board members as we proceed would be great. So is there any other conversation with regards to this matter?
So at this point, do we need a,
I am going to ask for a motion on both the equity audit contract and the purchasing agenda separately, if there's no
separately?
more questions.
Okay.
All right, I will start with the equity audit contract because that is a part of the purchasing agenda. Can I get a motion to move the equity audit contract to the full board for consideration?
motion to move the equity audit contract to the full board.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. That motion will pass and we'll move forward to the full board. And then is there a motion to move forward the purchases to the full board for consideration?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. And that motion will also pass to the full board.
All right, move on to reports and updates. January financial statements, the dashboard report is in your packet. This has been updated for Amendment 1 that the board approved last month. So you'll notice the projected fund balance, or fund balance projected, has been adjusted down to the almost 8.3 million, or 5.5%. And of course, this reflects our most up-to-date estimates at this point in time. And then remainder of the detailed financial statements follow as usual for those that want to get a little more into the guts, if you will. So any questions on that information? Bond update, Ken?
Quickly, the three major projects going on. Ottawa, we've been working with Earhart, the construction manager, to get back on our schedule. We were running behind. We do have a modified schedule that gets us done the 1st of August. There's some significant points that have to be met, including a significant amount of work by spring break, but we're proceeding to get to that point. Union, we again met with the construction manager, Aim Kimball, and revised the schedule. We did have Principal Rusi there, and it really impacted the auditorium wing and the media center. It allows us to keep moving at a good pace on the classrooms. That project will go into the fall of 2021. And Southwest Middle High, being a new building, is moving along much easier, and we're on schedule to be done about the 1st of July. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay, now, when the Southwest High, when that opens up, it's just going to have the 9th grade, like?
No,
you-
we'll have 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Oh, it's going
Yeah.
to.
So it will be half its student population at that point, and then it will gain a grade each year.
Okay. And then there's just one Dream Fund amount to report to the board. This is, you may recall that the Dream Fund between $2,500 and $99.99 we approve internally, but report to the board. There's just one this year, this month, $6,300 for Union High School. There have been a lot of smaller ones that have been improved, so the program is still up and running and doing well, if you will. So.
Is that program on schedule to stay apart for the next year?
Yeah, well, you know,
Personal conversation.
it's good through this year. The Community Foundation will determine whether or not it'll continue after that. I've not, at this point, not heard anything to the contrary, but
So this is just
We'll
support
see.
for the kids who are in that program?
this is for all those schools that are in the Challenge Scholar Program,
Right.
West Side schools. Yeah, these are smaller student or parent or staff initiated. And actually, there is an opportunity for nonprofit organizations can also apply for the benefit of students in those particular buildings. So it's being used, which is great. So thank you. The last thing in our policy, earlier this month, Governor Whitmer released her state budget, which includes the K through 12 education budget. We have not yet heard from the Senate or the House. Not sure when that's going to happen. I was reminded this morning of the KSBO meeting, and I'm not sure if you remember this or knew about this, but in the supplemental that was passed by the legislature to put back in some of those things that the governor vetoed, they actually, the House and Senate, agreed and codified that they would have the budget done by July 1st. Last year, it wasn't finalized until mid-September or thereabouts. So hopefully we'll have a better idea before we have to finalize our budget in June, where it may come out this year. Again, there'll be a revenue consensus meeting mid-May, and so anything final will not come out till after that point in time. But I can at least talk about what the governor has provided, which is actually good stuff. And what can I do? Oh, do it this
one.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah. I'll just start the first slide with a foundation history, which I've been providing to the board since I came here, going back to 2004. The red line would be the foundation allowance if we had just gotten the cost of living increase every year. So based in for 2021, it would come out to be almost $9,800 per student. The governor's budget would increase the foundation allowance for us by $225, which would get us to $8,336. So you can still see that significant $1,400 gap, which is why it's still a challenge every year to balance the budget. I will say the last 2 years, well, last year, and if the governor's budget comes to fruition this year, both the last year and this year, the estimate or the proposed budget would be increases greater than the cost of living index. So going to the details, some highlights that these are, it's a lot of detail in there, but these are the major highlights that would impact us the most, if you will. The overall funding, so both state dollars and federal dollars, and state dollars includes some one-time allocations in the budget, increased $765.1 million over the prior year, about 4.8% in total increases. Foundation allowance, it's a 1.5x, so ranging between 150 and 225. 290 million of that 765 million would fund that increase. For us, it'd be $225 per student, or $83.36 would be the new foundation allowance. 285.5 million for the preschool program, the GSRP. This is an increase of 35.5 million from the current year, 2020. The big impact was they would increase a per pupil allocation for a full day GSRP student from $72.50 to $83.36, which is a minimum foundation allowance for the rest of us students. There's not been an increase in this per pupil allocation since 2014 was the last increase. So it's been 6 years if this makes it through to the end. At-risk funding increased by 60 million up to a total of 582 million. Again, this is the governor's intent to fund schools on what's needed. So more money into special ed, we'll see in a minute. Some more money into the ELL programs also. The early middle college program, $8 million, same as last year. As robotics, same as last year at 4.7 million. She also includes a foundation allowance reduction of the virtual schools of 20%, which would put them at $66.69 per pupil. I will tell you the last, including this budget, the last 4 budgets had proposed a reduction, and also in the last 3 years, it did not make it through to the end. It came out, so governor's going to try again. We'll see what happens. On the MIPSERS front, total state funding in this budget will be at $1.6 billion. That's almost $206 million more than what's being funded this year. So the cost of that system continues to increase. Part of it is a reduction in the assumed rate of return. It looks like there will actually be a increase in the percentage cap that we have to pay on the unfunded amount. So it'd be there's been increases the last couple of years, but there's been a like increase in state funding to cover those increases. So our total net out of pocket has not really gone up. This year, it looks like from what and there's about 6 different sections that fund MIPSERS. So to try to make sense of where this all comes out sometimes gets difficult, but it looks like there may be an actual real increase in cost to us in the governor's budget as it stands right now. So we'll see how that turns out. Some other areas, special education cost reimbursement, again, to get to that equitable funding of another $60 million. It's a 2.1 percentage point. Special ed is reimbursed on a percentage of cost basis from the state. And so this would increase that percentage by 2.1 percentage points, get it up to, I think, 32% of costs to provide those services. There is a $25 million allocation, one-time allocation for classroom materials and supplies. That comes out to be about $250 per teacher. I will tell you, though, the procedures in the actual legislation, it's about 2 pages long, and it'd be an administrative nightmare. Let me just tell you that, an administrative nightmare.
This is for individual teachers, for their individual classrooms?
Yeah. It also, part of the rules and regulations in the legislation would give the teachers the option to opt out of it too, but in terms of the administration of it, the record keeping of it, it's a disaster. All right, that's all I can say at this point in time. So we'll see where that goes. ELL students, an additional $5 million to districts, about $50 per student. We have about 4,000 of our students are considered ELL students. So that'd be an additional $200,000 to us if that stays in place throughout the remainder of the process here. Last year, the governor proposed and it got through in the budget, $31.3 million to school mental health support services. She's recommending that stays in this year also. Total, as it relates to what comes out of the school aid fund into the community college and higher ed, her proposal has about $790 million for the 21 year. That's almost $26 million, and it's that more than what's coming out of the school aid fund in the current year, in the 2020 year. In terms of the allocation from the general fund, back when Proposal A came into being in '85, I believe the allocation from the general fund into the school aid fund was like $400 million. This year, the 2021 budget's $80 million, which is $17 million more than this year. But also way back then, there was no money coming out for higher education, as I just said, $790 million in her proposal. So that still is being used to fund higher ed because the general fund doesn't have sufficient funds to fund at the levels that the governor wants it to be funded. The next page just shows you the current fiscal year and the fiscal year 2021 under the governor's proposal, the ins and outs of the school aid fund. If you look at the very last line there, the estimated CAFR balance, so that's really the fund balance. So this year, if all goes according to schedule, it'll be about $263 million left in the school aid fund balance. And at the end of next year, she's going to spend some of that. We'll get it down to about $12.3 million. This will be updated pending the May revenue consensus meeting, and obviously the final budget, school aid budget. But right now, under the governor's proposal, $12.3 million fund balance in the next year. As this might look for us for next year, again, these are some round numbers based on our current enrollments, if you will. A foundation allowance increase would produce about $3.3 million in new funding. The additional at-risk funding, about $1 million. GSRP, based on the slots we currently fund, about $697,000. Special ed, about $630,000. And I mentioned, which is not up here, the $200,000 in the ELL program. So $5.8 million in the major. Again, there's some smaller pieces, ins and outs, if you will. Based on our current year general fund budget, which is $219.5 million, after Amendment 1, that'd be about a 2.6% increase over fiscal year 2020 for these pieces. The inflation rate last year on the calendar year basis was 2.3%, so that would give us a better than cost of living increase in total funding. But again, a long way to go until we get to the final budget. But I think the thing, as I said earlier, this is very positive for us. We like this, and if the House and Senate can come close to this, it'll be nice. The one thing that doesn't exist this year in the discussion of the school aid budget is this whole fix the road stuff, which last year was part of that, the discussion, in order to get what the governor proposed for last year's budget. She needed a 45-cent increase in the road tax. As you know, she's going to fund some of that construction with issuing bonds. So that is out of the discussion, at least for the school aid budget for the 21 year. So questions comments on that? And again, when the Senate and House come out with their budgets, I will bring highlights of that to this committee at that point in time. So. So yeah.
I just basically have a wondering, and I'd hate to shift from the governor's budget, which I think it's wonderful that, she's looking at it as more dollars to districts that have
Higher
students of a particular need background. My wondering is this, and I haven't seen this, and maybe I was absent at the meeting when it was presented or something, but just how it is that we determine our support for our students in the various buildings by the various categories that they exhibit in need, such as ELL and special ed and at-risk and whatnot. Are we taking the same approach as the governor is doing and allocating a supplemental amount to help address some of the special needs of these populations as we dole out dollars in support of instruction at the various schools that we have in the district? Are we doing that?
Yeah, I mean, our
comparably?
budget process, and we're really in the guts of it right now for next year. In fact, this week, we have what we call our building budget discussion. So we meet with building leadership, so business office, HR, the EDs of the various middle school, high school, elementary school, individually. And yeah, it's based on the needs of that student population. We allocate not only, obviously, state funds, but the title money based on the needs of the student population. We have projections of both regular ed students and the special ed students in the individual buildings by grade. And so those discussions in terms of allocation of the dollars, allocation, which directly impacts the allocation of, or the need for staffing, obviously. It takes place based on the needs of the building, absolutely.
So there is an alignment, you're saying, and
Yeah.
that the money that comes in of a supplemental nature,
Yeah,
which this is
absolutely.
supplemental, and does not supplant what
Yeah.
we have going to them, because that has been
Exactly,
the
yeah,
federal
exactly.
definition
Yeah,
of
exactly,
compliance.
exactly, yeah.
Historically in this district, but one that we need to fine tune to ensure that equity is provided to those students.
Absolutely.
With the dollars that are intended to follow them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will tell you that the needs of our students exceed the dollars available.
I understand
So there's
that.
some allocation that obviously has to take place, but the focus first is what are your needs of your building? And we try to meet those needs and every year. And I will, one of, Rhonda's been around a long time, Loretta English, who knows the federal and state programs inside out and is really our real lens about equity in terms of the allocation are involved. They're also involved in the team that, in terms of the building allocations process. When it's all said and done, we kind of look at it again, make some adjustments at the end there. By the time we get budgets brought to you guys, those decisions have been made. But yeah, absolutely. So.
I'd like my colleagues to remember this discussion, because I want to underscore the need for dollars to follow the students and their particular needs that are identified as deficits at this point, needing dollars and resources to remediate those deficits and to provide equal footing for them in the classroom. And that if the governor and if the federal government establishes those as the processes for prioritizing need and providing resources to alleviate those needs in the classroom and provide them equality of opportunity, then we need to ensure that our budgeting process does the same.
I've been to 2 meetings about that already, Jose, so
Okay, I just
trust me,
want- Good.
I've heard about it.
Good, I just want to underscore it for us, because that is the threshold for determining equity and equality.
I agree, 100%, 100%.
And, I don't think it's a far-fetched notion for us to even, we get the at-risk additional funding, or we get that title with the funding total, but maybe we can take some time at some of our future meetings and delve into some of those individually. I mean, why
Thank
not?
you.
Any other questions, concerns? Well, this meeting is adjourned.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Oberst, do you have your calendar?